Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Sneak Attack Commander deck for Magic the Gathering from the Zendikar Rising set. According to the back, it says, seize power once more, choose your commander, and overcome both friend and foe in this definitive multiplayer Magic format. Ally with Anowin and lead an army of rogues to take what is rightfully yours. The larger your collective, the more your influence grows. Anowin the Ruin Thief, formerly a renowned mage and scholar, Anowin's reputation and fortune have diminished in recent years. With the appearance of the ancient core Skyclaves, he knows his return to glory lies deep within the ruins, and he'll do anything to find it. It includes a 100 card deck with 3 new cards, deck box, 10 double-sided token cards, a life wheel, strategy insert, and reference card. Let's go ahead and see what's inside. Here's our deck box. It's got Anowin on one side and Sneak Attack on the other. Some mild art here. Looks like it'll fit sleeve cards, so that's a plus. We have our life counter here. We have a guide to how to play Commander here, so that is useful for those still learning the format. And on the back we have some information about Anowin. I'm glad that there is some biographical information here so you can feel a little bit more connected to Commander. We also have a little guide to how to play the deck. I think that this is not a lot of information because it doesn't really explain what the cards do so much, but hopefully you can find other resources that are a little bit better. I do wish that this were a little bit more comprehensive. Maybe make the thing a little bigger, tell you a little bit more about how to play the deck, what cards are important, etc., etc. Here's our commander, Anowin the Ruin Thief, in foil. Here are the cards. Let's take a look at the rest of the deck. We also have a tip card that reminds you of the phases of Magic and then popular Magic formats on the back. Now that we've had a look at the deck, we'll sleeve it up, we'll play it against its rival, and I'll be back to let you know what I think. Alright, so I've had a chance to play with this deck a bit, and I have some thoughts. The first thing to note about the deck is its commander. The Ruin Thief is basically interested in 2 different kinds of themes. The first one is having other rogues. And so this deck is heavy on rogues. This entire pile of cards here cares about rogues or enhances the class synergy of the deck in some way or another. Not every creature here is essentially a rogue, but cards like the Changing Outcasts are rogues by virtue of being a changeling. And so there are a number of cards here that are rogues, and so they get the benefit of Anowin's Lord ability here. And then the second thing that the deck is interested in is the graveyard, because when your rogues deal combat damage to a player, it forces your opponent to mill, and then you can draw cards if you mill at least 1 creature that way. The reason why you want to mill creatures is because this deck also has the capacity to return creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. And so all of these cards here have the ability to return creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. In addition, some of these cards have other features as well, or they care about cards and specifically creatures being in the graveyard to get some of their effects. For example, the Night Howler's power and toughness is based on the number of creatures in the graveyard. Sir Conrad does damage based on the creatures that are going into the graveyard. And then you have cards like Rise from the Grave or Necromantic Selection, which return creatures from the graveyard to the battlefield. And so when you're milling creatures from your opponents or your library to the graveyards, then you can use the creatures in those graveyards to power some of these cards that are here. There are only a handful of cards aside from Anowin, that really work on both fronts in terms of being rogues that are interesting graveyards. And so you have the Soaring Thought Thief here, the Nightfell Sprite, which can surveil, which means that you can throw cards into your graveyard if you want. And the Merfolk Windrobber, which cares about the number of cards in the graveyard. And so the synergy between the two are almost entirely hinged on Anowin being on the battlefield, because you're not going to be doing much milling otherwise with any of these other rogues here, except for these three. And so that is the two main themes of the deck. And because the synergy is not that strong, this deck is extremely reliant on Anowin being on the battlefield. And so you're going to want to cast this one a lot and protect Anowin if you have the capacity to do so. The rest of the deck has some expected things and some unexpected things. The first thing to note is that the deck has all of this in terms of its ramp package. It's all artifact based, so you have some standard cheap ramp cards here. The Soul Ring is probably the strongest of the bunch, but you also have some basic fixers like the Commander Sphere and the Arcane Signet. This is an okay ramp package. I think it could be improved upon. Also, in terms of the deck's mana capacity, you have this giant stack of tap lands, which will be a bit on the slow side, and so you're going to want to upgrade the lands. Although I would keep all of these in here and maybe upgrade the giant stack of basic lands, which there are both islands and swamps here. There's just a lot of them, and you're going to want to get more dual lands here as soon as you can. And so if there are any of these that are missing or that aren't tap lands, then I would look to perhaps put those in the deck. This makes the deck a bit on the slow side. There's not a ton of utility lands in the deck, the Rogue's Passage being the one exception. And I don't know if this is here just because it says Rogue's Passage, because this doesn't really care about rogues, but it does give your creatures the ability to not be blocked with the extra mana you might have, so that is not the worst thing in the world. And then these package of cards here are things that aren't directly related to the themes of the decks, but they are either utility cards or other effect cards that are sometimes important to decks and sometimes not. So this is just pure card draw. Like some of these cards here also enable you to draw cards, and so you're not just relying on these three cards to draw cards. For example, Sig can get you to draw cards, and Ocean Thief can steal your opponent's card draw, and so on and so forth. And so the rogues have a decent number of ways to get card advantage to their creatures, but these are your pure card draw spells here. And the Military Intelligence actually requires you to attack with creatures, and so these are not always the best card draw spells. I think you can do better, but I guess Factor Fiction is a decent one here. And then in terms of Wraths, there is Ingoruk's Wake, which costs a ton of mana. There's also the Necromantic Selection over there, which also costs a ton of mana. And then those are your two main ways to reset the board. There's not much else in this deck that does that. The other thing that you could theoretically think of as a board resetter is the Scourge of Fleets, which I put here in the utility pile of cards. And that's a creature that costs 7 mana that can bounce your opponent's creatures that have toughness less than the islands you control. Now, I don't love the Scourge of Fleets in this particular deck because this is a 2-color deck. As you can see, the swamps are as thick as the islands. And so the Scourge of Fleets will often only bounce small creatures, which is not terribly useful. And I think I would have rather had perhaps another rogue or something else that deals with graveyard than the Scourge of Fleets in this deck. Everything else here is some kind of removal or other kind of interaction in the deck, and there are pluses and minuses to some of these things here. So I don't know that I would say that these are all really great additions to the deck. It is good to have like pure kill spells like Murder and Price of Fame, but I would think that the deck could benefit from having better cards here as well, and better card draw spells as well, or at least pushing some of this into greater synergy with the deck's two main themes. Finally, these are the three just like totally out there cards that I don't love. And so you have the Blackblade Reforged, which I guess is a strong weapon if you can stick it on your legendary creatures, but it's not thematically synergistic with anything that this deck is trying to do. It's just a strong card, and I don't know that it really belongs here. The Scytheclaw costs 5, and yes, if you can hit with whatever creature it's attached to, then it's going to cause your opponent to lose half their life, which is impressive. But it's also just not thematically connected at all to anything that this deck is trying to do. And so I don't really like that in this deck. Stolen Identity, I guess, does let you copy a creature or an artifact, but I think that I would just rather have another rogue in this deck, something that is more thematically tied to the deck. Now, I guess Stolen Identity is a rogue, but why not have a different kind of clone? I understand that maybe the idea is that you can continue to do combat damage and then duplicate your rogues in some way, shape, or form, but I think that these three cards here are so disconnected from the theme of the deck and don't really play into standard utilities for decks that I'm not really a fan of these particular things, and I would probably try to upgrade, remove, or change them in some way. The whole package of rogues goes all the way up and down the scale, and some of these are not very good if you don't draw them at the right time. For example, 1/1 that can't be blocked, like Triton Shorestalker or the Slithblade. I mean, maybe you can get in for damage with Anowin and get some card advantage off of Anowin's ability, but these are not the most inspiring type of cards that you could possibly draw. And so, in the end, the deck's synergies are a little bit weak, and they're very much hinged on Anowin. And so, I think that this is one of those decks where you really have to like the commander, and you kind of have to hope that you can make the synergies tie together a little bit more. As the deck feels, I do think that there is just enough thematic connection between all of these rogues that it's enjoyable to play, but this is also one of those decks that I think you're going to be looking to play if you really like one or both of these themes. And again, Rogues is the stronger of the two themes, as you can see from it taking the bulk of the card slots. So that is my thoughts for Anowin the Ruined Thieves deck here. Let me know what your experience was with this deck in the comments below if you've had any. If you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to post those as well. You can see the games that I've played with deck in the playlist for the Zendikar Rising set that I also have linked off here. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.